What did you guys think? Yeah. Second time I've seen it, and I was standing there for the last 15 minutes, and within like 30 seconds of standing there, again, fully enwrapped in the film and the beauty of the film and hearing Henry's words. Let's bring back to the stage the producer, Tina O'Reilly.
Thank you.
Tina, that was amazing. We're so sorry that Pat can't be here, but we're thrilled that you're here to help represent the film. We have a few other people we'd like to bring.
Yes, please.
I'd let you introduce them.
Yes, I'd like to welcome down Henry himself and Pravina as well. Please come down. Oh, don't fall off the stage.
I'm going to get your hug. Oh my God.
Pravina.
Tina, maybe we can start with you. I know these are sort of questions I would have had for Pat, but I'm sure you can speak to them. I'm sure you can. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about how Pat found out about Henry and the stories and just the teachings and coming to make this film?
Yeah, well, Pat himself first heard Henry speaking on the radio in Ireland. You did an interview with Vincent Woods, and Pat was blown away, and the interview just stuck with him, I suppose, what Henry was talking about, and he couldn't get it out of his head. So he actually physically wrote a letter to Henry, and they corresponded back and forth a little bit. But then it was in 2015 when Henry was in Ireland, Pat asked to meet him. So they met and just they got on really well. And Pat convinced Henry to let him make a film about his work. So yeah, and then Pat came to my company, obviously, to see would we help him raise the funding for it. But that's where it started.
Brilliant. Henry, Pravina, is this the first time you're seeing the film?
It's the first time we're seeing the credits. That's what
Pay attention. Over here.
We've actually seen versions of it, but this is the only time that we've seen the final.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not right?
It's on. Just keep it up to your...
You want to talk?
No, you do.
No, we watched the film as it was developed, and it developed slowly, and we really enjoyed seeing pieces of it. So eventually they all came together, and I think Pat did a terrific job. I admit to being a little bit, great.
Yeah.
I just say that because it wouldn't take me a minute, but the main thing that I want to say, this is Pat's movie, it's Pat's film, it's Pat's work of art. I have my own works of art, and I do them, and I'm proud of them, but I'm proud of Pat, not me, I'm proud of Pat. At the same time, I have to admit that I'm a little bit emotional because there are a couple of people that appeared in the film, some of them not for a very long time, who have passed. That's it. Just made me, I had terrible moments of sadness, too.
Could I answer that question too? So our work as folklorists is very collaborative, right? So we work with people and we go back, we really get to know them. And what I really admire about Pat is how much, so we did see versions of this film and he asked for our advice and he always incorporated everything we told him. So he didn't just stick with what he wanted to do. He listened very carefully to us since we've been working with these artists and really admire him for that, admire his craft and admire him as an individual.
And one of the things that I loved about the film, and that Michelle mentioned earlier that she loved about the film too, was that contemplative nature of the way Pat approached it. Was that something that you think Pat had at the onset? Did that come as he was filming?
I think it was from the onset, from when Pat first started talking about the film and he put the proposal together, and before he didn't want to impose himself on what he was doing. He wanted to be an observational documentary and to get across I suppose that meditative nature of the art being created. So yeah, it was a deliberate decision. Yeah.
I would say it's absolutely Pat's style. When he spent a little bit of time trying to convince me to do this, and I wasn't particularly interested in being in a film, to tell you the truth. But what I did, I saw the Song of Granite. Some of you might have seen Pat's film, The Song of Granite. It's about the great singer Joe Heaney. There were two things in Song of Granite that just struck me as very powerful. One was there's a very early scene when the kid that's playing little Joe Heaney is just tracked over a very long time walking to school. Very patient, lovely. The other one was the singing of a woman by the Galway Shawl. And I'm very annoyed as the person who really loves traditional music. I'm a little bit annoyed when we get a half performance. You know, we got Hank Williams on the stage and you only see half of the song. I really love the fact that Pat showed the entire performance of that song, the Galway Shawl by a Young Woman. So those two things, when Pat then began to talk to me about making the movie, it was really those two features of his earlier film, Song of Granite, that I said, not only that we can work with this person, but really what I was most interested in, and I'll be very direct, what I was most interested in is getting somebody with that sensibility, with that quality, with that excellence in the film world to make films of the people that I loved. So that I wanted to give to Pat the people that I loved. That is to provide them, not me, but to provide them, so that the long scene in the beginning that, are you hearing me for this thing? I'm sort of waving this around. I feel a little bit foolish. But the long thing at the beginning when he has Rosalvo Santana, I think that's a kind of almost a test to the audience. Are you going to put up with that long? I mean, this is beautiful work, and Rosalvo is really a tremendously great artist. But I thought of the way that Pat moved very slowly to be very like the way that Herman Melville used cetology in Moby Dick. Are you going to hang with me while I'm telling you a lot of information that you need to know but might not want to know but is basic? And I've always thought that cetology is a kind of key to my own writing. There are a lot of times when I just say, I know that the reader doesn't want this. I know the reader doesn't want to know how Mustafa Sargon makes a box in Istanbul. I know they don't, but I'm in charge here. And so what I loved was that Pat just tests you a little bit at the very beginning because all the other pieces are shorter. So this long one with Rosalvo, man, he is a fantastic artist and a wonderful man. And this is an honor. This is a piece of respect to Rosalvo that I think is just a treasure for the world, honestly. And the scene of Samuel welding together that image, that's Oshasi, who is the Yoruba god of the forest. He's making this image of Oshasi out of old junk. That's a piece of treasure. I mean, the world will now have that. And really what I did at the very beginning when Pat was talking to me about making a film, that's what I wanted. I didn't care about me, and still don't. But I cared tremendously about Rosalvo. I cared tremendously about Samuel. I cared tremendously about Daniel Johnston, who appears late in his beardy young man. These are people that I love. They're not, and I wanted to I trusted Pat. I put them into his hands, and he did. He honored them, and that's really the thing that I most care about. He did a fantastic job in representing these people whom I love. It's that simple.
Honoring them, absolutely, he did. Absolutely. And you were speaking exactly of that opening scene. It was a long one, but it was a test, and you don't realize
but I think it was
that.
good.
Yeah.
It was
brave.
excellent.
It was brave
No,
of him
it
to do. He
was.
could have had something bouncy, but he had that long scene with Rosalvo, and it's a treasure. Ethnographically, it's a treasure for us to know how that's done.
Yeah.
But at the same time, yeah.
But you talked about versions. The first version, that thing was much longer.
Yeah, we suggested maybe it could be a little bit
Tiny
shorter.
bit shorter.
We did recommend it
Yeah.
being a little bit shorter, but the fact is,
Yeah.
it's still long, and I think it's great. It's really at a kind of a point. It's like a long piece of description that, let's say, Orhan Pamuk would provide in his great novels. You just say, I'm getting a little bit more information than I want, and just about the point where you're breaking, so to hell with this book, I'm going to put it down. All of a sudden, he switches. Really good. So we switched to Nilo, and then Nilo is very brief. Really, I think the way that the film was cut and the way the film was shot is a treasure to the world. That's what I think.
So it sounds like Henry and Praveen are still in charge in most ways.
Pravina's in charge.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Because I don't want to take up all the time. The gentleman over there.
What piqued your interest in going to Bahia in the first place?
You want to answer that? Okay. Well, it's not too complicated. Pravina was raised in Brazil. She speaks perfect Portuguese. She speaks native Portuguese. And the thing that excited us maybe about going to Brazil were really two things. Pravina had done fieldwork in Brazil before. I had done fieldwork in Nigeria. And so actually I kind of went in the wrong direction. A lot of people get excited about the kind of African religion and the African art of Bahia and then go to West Africa. But I'd already been to West Africa. I'd been to Nigeria. And so I was really excited to see Candomblé. That was the beginning of it. It expanded to other things, but our original interest was to spend time with the Candomblé artists, to learn from the artists who make the Candomblé images, that is the Yoruba images in Bahia, and then to expand from their work into an understanding of the religion. And that's what we did. There was a little bit of a footage of a candomblé ceremony and so on, but we started in candomblé and then expanded to a lot of other interests that were there. Because Pravina knew Portuguese, I'd already spent a lot of time worrying about the Yoruba religion and following Yoruba. We've been to a lot of Yoruba events in Nigeria, so that there was kind of a convergence of her being raised in Brazil and me being really excited by the Yoruba religion and Yoruba art.
Right at the very back.
Well, it's honestly, I think that there's an interest in the rural in this film, which is quite accurate. That is to say, I began in the countryside, Pat began in the countryside. I think we're both kind of farm boys that got into this racket. But the fact is, Toronto's a big city, but it's as nothing compared to Dhaka, and as nothing compared to Istanbul. And I have spent a decade in both of those cities studying really complex urban situations. The situation in Istanbul is different in that the immigrants are country people that are coming into the city, and they're not ethnically diverse, really. They're all Turks. But Dhaka is an amazing, I mean, Dhaka is going to be pretty soon the biggest city in the world. And so it's not any difficult, I haven't given you a very good answer, but you start with the individual. The individual expands into a community. The communities then will intersect into a city. As long as you do, it's a little bit like they have me quoting in the film say, it begins with maps. And I started mapping old Dhaka. That's the way I got to know the city of Dhaka. We're talking about 25 million people. But I started in one neighborhood, Koshakari Bazaar. I got to know that neighborhood and I expanded out. And pretty soon you expand out and pretty soon you're at the end of the city. So that the diversity of a big conurbation is not studied any differently than a tiny little place like Ballymonone. That's not a bad answer, honestly. It was quite true. You're not starting with some theory of collective. You're starting with an individual. You know, I'm starting with Tina. She's got friends. I'm going to get to know those friends. She's got relatives. I'm going to get to know those relatives. She lives in a place. I'm going to get to know that place. And pretty soon it's going to expand. And so I was perfectly happy, as the movie said, I was perfectly happy to spend 10 years studying 153 people in Ireland. I spent the next 10 years studying 65 million people in Turkey. Same methods worked fine. Depends on patience, like Lady Gregory said.
Yes, right there.
The only time in the movie where you talk about your own work is about the books you wrote about Ballymonone and the books you shared with the people of Ballymonone. Two questions. How did they react to your books, and how has that community changed in the year since?
The answer to the second question is how has it changed almost unbelievably. It's changed, that community of Ballymonone has changed more since I began doing fieldwork there, which was 1972. Has changed much more than any place that I know of in the United States. The change is really dramatic. I could go on and give you a whole lot of detail, but I'll start at the other end of the thing and say, what was the reaction of the people of Ballymonone? I was actually given that perfectly answered twice. The first time is when my big book on Ballymonone came out. People looked at it and said, oh, that's really a big book. We're talking about 880 pages of detailed information about a tiny little community. And so the young men said, we can't read this damn thing. They took it to the local priest and said, Father, we can't make any sense of this damn thing. Will you read it? Priest read it, returned it to them about 6 months later. And they said, what do you think? He said, this man knows everything about you, but he didn't say it. And in Ireland, I was there in the middle of the Troubles. Did I know who'd killed people? You bet I did. Was that in my field notes? Absolutely not. My house was raided. The police came. They took all my field notes away. If I'd put dangerous information in my field notes, I might have led to the death of somebody. It's not my business. I'm describing here. So the first thing that's that they just trusted the priest to tell them that I knew everything, but hadn't said there were certain kinds of information people didn't want out in the world. There were gay people there. They didn't want that published. Unwed mothers there. They didn't want that published. There are killers there. They didn't want that published. I can work around and tell my story without endangering people. So just a couple of years ago, the community of Ballymonone had an event. Pravina and I were there, and she called it a magical night. The whole parochial hall at Arnie was filled, more than the population that had been there when I was there before. Everybody was there, and they stood in a line at the end of the thing that took hours to pass. I had to be thanked by every single member of that community. And they thanked me because I'd paid attention to their grandparents, and they hadn't. And one by one, they came up, hugged me, kissed me. Few people wanted their books signed, but mostly people just wanted to thank me. Thank me for paying attention to their grandparents, and thank me for not revealing really dangerous information they knew I knew. So the reaction, what can I say? The reaction by Irish people to American anthropologists has generally been quite negative. Two people who had written big books on Ireland that were Americans have been asked not to come back to the community. Nancy Shepherd Hughes, John Messenger, did bad stuff. I think it's just that simple, did bad stuff. I didn't. We go back all the time.
Over here. Did you hear the question?
I didn't.
The question is about, was there any difficulties in shooting the film?
No, not really. It was a very small crew, so it was Pat, the director, our cinematographer, Colm Hogan, his assistant, with two different assistants, one in Brazil and one in the States, Roman in Brazil and Tom in the States, and Roman again in Ballymonone, and Bob Brennan on sound, and a production with Fiona, production assistant Fiona in Brazil, and Pravina did all the work in North America, and we did Ashley in Ireland. But it was that small of a crew. It was 5-6 people. So no, we had no difficulties really. It was we spent 15 days, I think, in Brazil, and it was about 11 days in the States and 3 or 4 days in Ireland. And most of the time went into the post-production, which was quite long in the end, probably about 18, 19 weeks. Yeah.
I might expand on that just slightly because, of course, there are always problems, but the way that we did things in Brazil is that Pravina and I were there for a good long time before the film crew showed up, and so that we went to every single person and we talked to people about what it was going to be like and excited them about the possibility of the film. So we had, it would be right to say, done a little bit of filtering before the film crew arrived because it was... Yeah, well, see, we'd written a book with all these people in it, and so, I mean, this would be a very simple thing.
Buy the book.
Yeah, cheap copies. No, but the truth is, we wouldn't have made the film if the book weren't finished. That would be true. I wouldn't have trusted to bring. It's a very delicate situation. Somebody like Samuel Rodriguez, who's doing that welding. He's a difficult guy to get to know. We befriended him, but it took us a long time. We didn't just walk in and say, "Hi, we want to be in the movie." We met him, and he was very elusive. He lives on the street a lot of times. He doesn't have a permanent address. He's got nothing. He's a poor guy. He lives on the streets. It takes a while to get to know a person like that and bring him into confidence. And I love Samuel, and now, I mean, he's made great gift stuff. We've made great gifts back. But that took 10 years. In other words, by the time that the film crew shows up, and this is very important, what I think this film does, I say it very simply, it's the convergence of a very inexpensive slow method and a very expensive quick method, and how they can collide effectively. And we really, I think it really worked well, because Pravina and I see been a long time there talking about Turkey. I spent 12 years writing about Turkey, learning Turkish well and so on. So the first thing is that we could prepare. We knew everybody, and we could prepare them for the. But if there were going to be problems, for example, a wonderful guy, Ubirasi Tibarisa, that we wanted to be in the movie, he said, that's good. He said, would they pay me to be in the movie? And I said, you get a little bit of pay. I'm not for sale. I'm not going to be in the movie. See, we didn't have to have that event.
He was in the book.
Yeah, he's in the book, and he gets a big place in the book. But we didn't have to have that kind of a dangerous conversation with Pat in the room. That had already happened. That's fine. You don't want to be in the flick. That's just fine with us. Other people we talked to, like Evidal, who talks about the saints that he made, he was thrilled. I mean, in that film, he's 79 years old. He's still hard at work. And he was just exhilarated that he would be recorded. We feature him in our book. I'm going on a little bit here. I bet maybe people are patient. We featured him in a book. There had never been one word written about that man before, because his art falls between categories. It's not sort of progressive art, but it's not folky either. It's highly professional Baroque art. There's nobody to write about that stuff. He's featured in our book. Not a single word had ever been written about him. But anyway, he was exhilarated. So what I'm saying, the first thing about it is we've done a lot of preparation. The second thing about it, it's got nothing to do with us. It has everything to do with Pat and the crew. Brazil, they've never felt heat like that. Come on. Unbelievable. They felt North Carolina was hot, but we're talking about right on the equator. It's really hot. All these handsome people came from Ireland. They immediately turned really pink. And all of a sudden, blots appeared because there's mosquitoes everywhere. And a lot of those mosquitoes are carrying dangerous diseases. I got one of them. And so they were very brave. That's the second thing I'd say, that there were no problems, but were no problems partially because we made preparation before. There's no problems because these were really good human beings. They met other people. They didn't complain. I mean, when you're way out in the interior of Brazil in a place like Marigo de Pinho, we're not talking about 4-star, we're not talking about 1-star things. We're talking about bad hotels that don't smell good, that have weird stuff going on, in the walls. So that the things went well, but they went well for a good reason. There was a lot of preparation before, and there was great courage in the film crew. Everybody ended up loving the crew. It's that simple. They just loved Pat and the crew.
We only have another minute or two, but I'm just really curious. Pravina and Henry, any recent trips, any trips coming up, any new places that you're heading to?
Well, we spent last summer in Brazil again. This gentleman in the back spotted that there was kind of concentration on Bahia in this one, and so we're now concentrating a little bit to the north in Pernambuco and a little bit out into the countryside towards the Sertão. And we've been there a lot, and we spent all this summer there, so we have a whole another Brazilian book coming up. And as long as we can plug this, that Daniel Johnson, the guy with the beard, I have just sent off to China for printing a book about Daniel, and that ought to be out in about 2 months. And so that these are all people that we're, at the same time that we love for them to be in the movie, we're also sort of trailing behind them a great quantity of detailed information that appears in print. So there's
in the last minute or so, I'm a folklorist. Henry has retired. I still teach at Indiana University. I teach a large course. I teach a graduate course. When we saw the final cut of this film, I wrote an email to Pat thanking him, not as Henry's wife, but as a folklorist. I think it's very important that he's put this beautiful film about what we do, reaching audiences that are not in the classroom, that may not be reading our books. And I just found it just so beautiful. And I'd like to publicly thank Pat Collins for the very beautiful film he made.
It truly has been an honor to see the film. It's truly been an honor to have the three of you here today. Please, please, please tell Pat our deepest love of the film and thank him tremendously for allowing us to have the world premiere of the film here. Ladies and gentlemen, Tina, Henry, and Pravina, thank you.
Thank you.
Please vote for this film.
Yeah. Thank you.